Keanu Reeves sat in one of the quiet corners of the restaurant, hiding from the eyes of the public. This was his way of relaxing, without cameras and interviews. He wasn't looking for excitement today. He simply wanted to enjoy a delicious meal in solitude. However, when he raised his eyes, his gaze caught a girl sitting at the piano. She started to sing. The lyrics, soaked in deep pain, penetrated his soul, touching something long forgotten. There was something more in her voice than just music. Keanu felt that in her song, there was a hidden secret. He couldn't help but notice how she lost herself in the performance, as if her entire soul was dedicated to that moment. When the girl finished singing, her gaze darted towards Keanu. He was sitting, absorbed in her song, and she, noticing his attention, understood that his reaction was sincere. She walked up to his table, her steps cautious but determined. Keanu, slightly surprised, lifted his gaze and met her eyes. His face remained calm, but there was a flicker of curiosity in his eyes. She sat down next to him, placing her hands on the table, but didn't speak right away. Instead, she just quietly sat there, looking into his eyes, as if gathering the right words. Keanu leaned forward slightly, signaling that he was ready to listen. "I know, maybe you don't understand, but I had to sing. It wasn't for the audience. It's for him," she said, her voice soft but resolute. "My grandfather will have surgery tomorrow, and this song, it's like a farewell. It's all I can do for him." Keanu felt a tightness in his chest. His thoughts immediately turned to his loved ones, those dear to him. He could understand what she was feeling. The moment of saying goodbye to a loved one is always hard, but for her, this song was so much more than just a farewell. It was her way of gathering strength to survive the day that would be the hardest of her life. He didn't know what to say, but all he could do was listen. He felt her words touch something deep within his soul. "It's terrible when you realize you can't do more for someone you love," he said, his voice soft and warm. "But sometimes help doesn't come in the form we expect. Sometimes help comes through music, like you said." She looked at him with gratitude, but his words didn't immediately comfort her. She continued to look into his eyes, as though hoping to find an answer to her question there. "Are you so sure?" she asked, her voice tinged with doubt. "Why do you say that music can help? I don't understand. What can it change in a situation like this?" Keanu took a deep breath and thought for a moment. He knew his words might be unexpected, but he was certain that her soul needed answers. He pondered how to explain to her why music plays such an important role in our lives. "Music," he began, his voice low, as if he were searching for the answers himself. "It's not just sound. It's a way to convey feelings that we can't express with words. It's like a bridge between people, helping us feel each other, even when words are powerless. You sing for him because it helps him feel your light, your support. Music can heal the soul, and it can perhaps give him strength more than you think." She was silent for a moment, processing his words. Keanu could see her eyes becoming moist, and he felt her pain pass through to him, his own chest tightening. He didn't know why, but her emotions had infected him. He saw her holding back tears, and it made him feel helpless. "I don't know if I can get through this," she whispered, clenching her fists. "He's so weak. I'm scared for him." Keanu remained silent, unsure of what to say. He knew there were no words that could take away her pain, but he was ready to be there for her, share his experience, and support her as much as he could. Instead of speaking, he simply placed his hand on her shoulder, offering his presence in that moment. "You're not alone," he finally said, his voice full of certainty. "You're not alone in this. And don't forget that music is something that can connect hearts and give strength. You're already doing so much for him." She looked at him, and there was acknowledgement in her eyes. She nodded, as if agreeing with his words. But Keanu could see that inside she wasn't fully at ease. Her heart was still full of pain and anxiety. "And you?" she asked, changing the subject, but her voice remained calm. "What helps you in moments like this? I can see that there's something more to you than just kind words." Keanu felt the weight on his heart. He had always been a closed-off person, never sharing too much about himself. But there was sincerity in her question that touched him. "What helps me is understanding that I'm not alone in the world, that there are people I can do something for," he said with a gentle smile full of kindness. "I didn't always know what to do, but helping others, even just a little, gives meaning." He paused for a moment. Should he continue? But she wasn't just some stranger. Her story was real. And her gratitude and belief in music, he couldn't ignore it. Music doesn't just help you, it helps everyone around you. It's the ability to express feelings that words can't say, and even more, to pass on the strength you give him in that song. She looked at him with slight surprise and gratitude, and Keanu felt that their conversation, though brief, was still significant for her. In that moment, he felt the emptiness in his soul begin to fill, even if just for a second. But she didn't yet know that behind this conversation, there was much more that Keanu would decide to do for her and her family. When the girl sat down on the chair opposite Keanu, there were no tears or despair in her eyes. But the internal tension was felt in every part of her body. She was trying to keep herself together, but Keanu could see her hands slightly trembling. He knew it was because of her worry for her grandfather. The surgery he was about to undergo was risky, and she was trying to find ways to survive this moment. Keanu listened to her in silence. She spoke about how hard it was for her to watch his weakness, how they had been each other's support for so many years, and now she had to be strong. Keanu felt his heart tighten. He didn't know what to say as the word strong in moments like these felt empty and meaningless. He wanted to offer some words of comfort, but he knew that whatever he said would not be enough. Instead, he just sat next to her silently, letting the silence speak much more than words. The emotions she was feeling filled the air, and he felt each of her experiences as if they were his own. "I'm scared," she said suddenly, her voice becoming quiet, but her eyes growing clear and determined. "I'm scared I'll lose him, that I won't be able to be by his side. It's too hard, Keanu. I don't know how to get through this." Keanu leaned forward, his gaze more focused, and he began to speak quietly, but confidently. "You're not alone. You can always be there for him, even if you can't be with him every single moment. He feels your support, and the music you sing already gives him strength." The girl looked at him closely, and doubt appeared in her eyes. "But how can you be so sure? These aren't just words. This is real pain, real fear. How can I be sure that I can support him when I feel like I can't even handle it myself?" Keanu felt her doubts starting to overshadow all the words he could say. He knew that words weren't what she needed. It was something far more important. He paused for a moment, and feeling the tension rise, he spoke. "Remember that even in the hardest situations, there's strength you don't see. But it exists. You don't have to have all the answers, but being there and offering support, that's what can give him more strength than you realize. Sometimes it's important just to be there. You don't always have to find answers. Being there, that's enough." At that moment, the girl looked at him again with a new gaze. Her eyes softened and her tension eased a little, but she still couldn't shake the feeling of helplessness. "Do you really believe that?" Her voice was full of sincerity, but there was still uncertainty in it. Music, can it really change something? Keanu didn't rush to answer. He looked into her eyes as if trying to find words that would reach her. Suddenly, he thought about his own life and how music had always been a part of his existence. Even if he couldn't play an instrument or sing, music had always been that invisible force that supported him through difficult times. "Music can do a lot," he said, his voice soft but filled with confidence. It can not only mask the pain, but it can also help express what words can't. Music has the power to create a connection, even between people who are bound by just one moment. You sing, and in doing so, you're telling your grandfather that you're with him, that you're here. That's more important than you think. The girl was silent for a moment, then nodded slightly. I never thought of it like that, she quietly admitted. I was just trying not to break, but now that you say it, I understand that it might be more important than I thought. Keanu noticed how her face gradually softened. The stern expression eased, and her eyes gained a new light, as if shedding clarity on her inner struggle. She was beginning to realize that her feelings were not isolated, that even her pain could become part of a greater, more important process. You don't have to be perfect, he said gently. You don't have to do everything right. You're already doing more than enough just by being there and supporting him. You don't need to try to be strong, just be with him. She smiled, and Keanu felt her tension begin to fade. Her gaze became more confident. I never thought I could be this strong, she said. But now, thanks to your words, I feel like I can get through this. Keanu nodded, and in that moment, he realized that the conversation with her wasn't just about helping her, but also about how she had helped him. Because, despite all his accomplishments, there were many unspoken things and questions in his life, and perhaps this conversation became as much of a revelation for him as it had been for her. The night deepened into silence, and as they left the restaurant, Keanu suggested taking a walk in the park. They walked slowly, enjoying the quiet and solitude. There were no pauses in their conversation, only mutual understanding. They talked about life, family, and music, but something in the air told them both that this meeting would be meaningful. Keanu couldn't explain why it mattered to him so much, but what he felt that evening was real. Not just words, not just comfort. It was support that came not from someone else, but from life itself. And at that moment, he realized that sometimes we find answers in the most unexpected places, even in simple yet profound conversations with complete strangers. However, as they parted for the night, Keanu felt that their meeting wasn't over. He sensed that their conversation would open up a new path for him, one that he couldn't yet see. Minutes passed, and Keanu couldn't help but feel the heaviness in his soul. Breathing in the fresh evening air, he realized that this walk in the park wasn't just a coincidence, but a moment that could change a lot. He and the girl walked side by side, and the air was filled with a strange mixture of relief and unclear tension, as if each of them was going through something but didn't want to reveal it. The girl, still keeping her hands in her pockets, began to speak first. She paid attention to the details as if trying to regain control over what was happening. Keanu, you know, when I started singing for my grandfather, I thought it was just a way to be close to him during the hardest moments. But it turned out that music is so much more. It's not just words, it's something that can change us, help us survive loss, and maybe even teach us to let go. Her voice was quiet, but there was a confidence in it that Keanu had not heard before. He looked at her and noticed how her eyes filled with warmth. It wasn't just an experience, it was a moment of inner realization that had changed her. Yes, he said, slowing his pace. Music can be a powerful medicine. I've always known it helps people, but I never thought it could be so strong that it could change a life. His voice sounded sincere, and they stopped by a bench in the park, both understanding that this moment had to be shared as two people who weren't afraid to be vulnerable. She looked at him intently, and after a pause, she continued, You know, it's hard for me to put this into words, but I often think that maybe music is what keeps us alive. When I sang for my grandfather, I wasn't just performing a song. I experienced every moment, every chord, because all my strength was in it. I felt that if I could convey that strength to him through the music, he would feel that everything would be okay. But at some point I realized that I was singing for myself too. to find the strength within myself to survive this moment, to help myself move forward." Keanu was silent, feeling how her words were reaching his heart. He knew he himself was on the verge of change, and this feeling was becoming more and more real to him. "Sometimes music really does help us to be strong," he finally said. "But I think what's more important than music is who's with us in that moment." She stopped, turned to him, and something new appeared in her eyes. The realization that she wasn't alone in her feelings. "You know," she continued, "you've become more than just a person who helped. You've become someone who opened my eyes to how important each moment is when you're with the people you love. I didn't know I needed to understand this, but when I think about it, I feel how much it means to me." Keanu felt how this revelation became important for him. He looked at her and noticed that her gaze had become deeper, more confident. It was as if she was now talking not only about her grandfather, but also about herself, about how she had learned to be strong, not just for others, but for herself. "You're right," he replied. "Being with the people you love truly gives you strength. Sometimes we search for answers in other things, in other people, but it turns out that all we need is to be with those who understand us." They were sitting on a bench in the shade of a tree, deep in thought. Keanu felt that this meeting had become a turning point, that something important was beginning to happen between them. He didn't know what the next day would bring, but sitting next to her now, he felt that their conversation and this walk would change a lot in his life. Suddenly, the girl stood up and turned to him. "Keanu," she said, her voice soft but full of determination, "I want to thank you. You have no idea how much you've helped me. Not just with money, but with your support. You've given me something more, faith in the fact that when we're together, everything becomes possible." Her words touched him deeply, and Keanu didn't know how to respond. He realized that this meeting had become something more than just a random encounter. He felt that something real had developed between them, that they had become a support system for each other in this difficult moment. When they stood up and headed back through the park, Keanu looked at her with a slight smile. "You know, it seems to me that this isn't a coincidence. We didn't meet just by chance, and perhaps this meeting will change both of us." She looked at him and smiled in response. "Yes, I think you're right. There are so many random encounters in life, and sometimes they turn out to be the most important of all." And as they walked through the park under the streetlights, they felt how much had changed. But this was only the beginning. A few days passed, and Keanu couldn't get the thoughts of that walk in the park out of his mind. Even though his life was filled with events and obligations, that evening with the girl had left a mark on his heart. They were completely different people, yet at that moment when their paths crossed, there was something unusual in their interaction. The girl he had so randomly met turned out to be more than just someone he could be kind to. She was someone with whom he could share a part of his soul. Keanu wasn't used to opening up to people, especially those who were strangers. But with her, it was different. Every conversation felt more sincere and genuine. But time passed, and Keanu was once again consumed by his work. His name was in the news, his schedule was filled with events, and his life was once again overtaken by his public role. He rarely went to regular places and felt that his world had become something like an empty shell. Several weeks went by, and one evening, Keanu was heading home. The subway was dark and quiet, with only the faint light from the windows of the train cars casting a foggy, somber atmosphere in the space. He sat on a bench, his gaze directed out the window, but his mind was far away. Then, suddenly, his attention was caught by a figure. She was standing slightly apart from him in the crowd, and even in the crowd, she stood out. It was her, the girl from that evening in the park. She was dressed casually, yet there was something uniquely distinct about her. Keanu instantly recognized her. She noticed his gaze and slowed her pace a bit. He stood there, not sure how to react. He was worn out, tired of his life and constant obligations, but in her presence, everything seemed to change. She approached him with a cautious smile, and Keanu immediately felt that her gaze was full of warmth and kindness. "Keanu?" Her voice was light and warm. "Is it really you?" She walked closer, and Keanu felt his heart skip for a moment. His face softened, and he responded with mild surprise. "Yes, it's me. How did you end up here?" "I was heading home and saw you," she said, studying his expression with interest. "I didn't expect to see you here, but, it's strange. But I felt like something was supposed to happen if I saw you. We talked back in the park, and somehow I feel like this is not a coincidence." Keanu lifted his gaze, his face relaxing. He felt the tension fade away, and that familiar calmness he was used to in moments of silence started to settle in. "I needed to see you," he finally said. "I just didn't know where to go next. That moment in the park was something real, and after you helped me open my eyes, things have become easier." She smiled and lowered her gaze to the ground, as if she had also realized something. "I know how you feel. There are moments when everything seems empty, and then you meet someone who somehow makes you feel that everything will be okay." Keanu nodded, continuing to stand next to her. "I know you've had to go through a lot," she continued. "I saw how down you were, and now in this moment I'm glad that I can be here and just talk to you. Maybe this is the answer." They were silent for a few minutes, needing no words. The subway continued to move, but around their small world, there was a quiet stillness. Keanu thought about how quickly everything changes. When he first met her, he had no idea that this encounter would bring him such thoughts and feelings. "You really changed my perspective on life," he finally said. "Being close to those you care about really matters more than all these successes and social events." She turned to him, and their eyes met. It wasn't just communication. It was as if they were mutually acknowledging that each of them could give something important. "Well then, maybe we should take a walk together," she suggested. "I'd be happy to," Keanu replied, smiling. "Let's go, but no rush." They exited the train and walked down the street toward a quiet park. That evening, under the streetlights, they walked away from the hustle and bustle of the city, and this moment became the beginning of something new for both of them. A few hours spent walking together marked the start of long and meaningful conversations that would change their lives in the future. And although Keanu didn't know where their relationship would lead, he felt that he was on the right path. Sometimes, to find answers, it's enough to just be with those who truly matter to you. And this moment, this encounter, remained for both of them that turning point that made their views and lives change. Keanu sat in his chair, his fingers nervously toying with the edges of the book he was still holding. The whole evening after the unexpected meeting with the girl, her gaze and words kept swirling in his head. He didn't know what to feel. He wasn't prone to overthinking, but now every moment of his life seemed like part of something larger. Everything that had seemed certain and unshakable suddenly collapsed. Why did she stir such feelings in him? Why, despite all his successes and achievements, did he feel disconnected from the world? He didn't know how to explain it, but perhaps it was all connected to that night when he wasn't just helping for no reason. Perhaps it all started with the song she sang for her grandfather, a song that reflected the entire human soul. Pain, hope, love. Now he couldn't shake the thought that this meeting had changed something inside him. Not waiting for the end of the flight, Keanu stood up and walked to the window. His gaze was directed toward the endless sky, which now seemed vast and cold, and he felt that this very sky was just a wrapper for something much larger. Why had she affected him so much? Why couldn't he stop thinking about her? About the way she sang? About the way her eyes sparkled in the dark when she found the strength for her grandfather? When he returned to his seat, his mind was still filled with the same doubts. What now? He would like to talk to her, but how? Should he just be there for her as he promised, or should it be something more? But what would that mean for his life? For her life? He didn't know what to do next, but he realized one thing. He couldn't just sit on the sidelines watching everything unfold. His inner voice screamed that he had to take the next step. The next morning, they met again on the plane. This time, the atmosphere was different, heavy, tense. The whole crew felt it. She knew her grandfather would soon undergo an important surgery, and anxiety was written on her face. She felt the need to talk, to say something. But when she approached Keanu, he realized that his doubts were still unresolved. He looked into her eyes and immediately understood. She was not like the others. She saw more in him than just a famous actor. She saw a human being, and so she decided to speak. She began telling him how her perspective on life had changed after he helped her. She said she never expected such a turn of events, that his support had been like a light at the end of a tunnel. She hadn't known he was the one who helped, but listening to his words, she felt that this person was capable of seeing more than anyone else. But Keanu felt that this wasn't a coincidence, this meeting, this help. They were part of something bigger than just a noble gesture. It was the beginning of a journey he was meant to take. In that moment, he realized that he was also looking for something, but what it was, he didn't know. In the evening, they were at a restaurant. The atmosphere was calm, but tension hung in the air. Keanu tried to understand what was really happening. His life was beginning to feel like an unexplored territory, filled with doubts and questions. He didn't know what he wanted from this meeting, but he understood that continuing to live without finding answers was no longer an option for him. The girl sat next to him, and when she spoke, her words seemed to cut through the fog of Keanu's thoughts. She spoke about the importance of being close to loved ones, about how important it is not just to exist, but to be part of someone else's life. And it wasn't just a reminder, but a true understanding she had gained from this situation. Keanu thought that perhaps this is how growth happens. When you start realizing that your actions and decisions can actually change someone else's life. It was more than just helping. It was a real understanding of his role in someone else's life, and so they walked through the park, cheerful and at ease, as if they had known each other all their lives. Keanu felt something in his soul beginning to open, and despite the fact that they were completely different people, what stood between them was something much greater, something that truly connected them. They had both become a support to each other in this difficult moment. The park was just as it always was, calm, filled with the sounds of night birds and silence. But for Keanu, this evening had become something important. He realized that perhaps this girl was the key to helping him understand himself. The questions that had troubled him for so many years began to find answers. However, despite the light that had entered his life, Keanu knew that it wasn't all that simple. His thoughts remained tangled, but something inside him had changed. He couldn't ignore what had happened that evening. "What do you think will happen next?" the girl asked, noticing how lost in thought he seemed. Keanu, looking at her, realized that this was indeed an important milestone, a transition into a new life for him. He didn't know what would happen next, but he knew one thing for sure. He needed to move forward, despite all the fears and doubts. Keanu felt the fog of doubt wash over him once again. The walk in the park had left a mark on his soul, but he didn't know what to do with this feeling. It wasn't just a meeting. It was a moment when his life began to intersect with someone else's, and he felt his heart begin to open to something new. They sat on a bench, and the girl, looking at his thoughtful face, quietly asked, "You're not yourself, are you? Something's bothering you." His eyes met hers, and despite the internal struggle, he realized he could no longer hide what he felt. He decided to be honest. "It's not like I thought. We all play our role in someone else's life, but you helped me understand that I can change something too." Her eyes filled with a soft light, and she nodded, as if understanding what he was saying. But just then, Keanu's phone rang. He looked at the screen and saw an unknown number. "Sorry, I need to take this," he said, standing up and walking aside. His hand trembled slightly as he picked up the phone. On the other end, his assistant's voice came through. "Keanu, there's news. You need to come back. There's an important meeting waiting for you. Now." He hung up and returned to the girl. His face had become more serious. "I have to go," he said, his voice wavering slightly. "But you made me realize I need to move forward." She nodded silently and he left, walking quickly through the park. He didn't look back. It was a moment of farewell, but also a new beginning. He knew that now he had to make a choice. A few weeks passed. Keanu couldn't forget that meeting. He found himself thinking more and more about the girl who had changed his perception of the world. But fate played its role again. One day, as he was leaving the theater, Keanu spotted her in the crowd. She was holding a small package, as if waiting for him. She noticed him, and their eyes met. "You came back," she said with a slight smile, although her eyes were full of concern. "Yes," he replied, slightly confused. I can't leave this behind. You were right. I need to move forward." She stepped closer to him, and their gazes crossed, filled with a new understanding. Both of them knew their meeting wasn't accidental. "Did we find what we were looking for?" she asked. Keanu sighed quietly and, taking a step forward, said, "I don't know, but now I know I'm not alone." And in that moment, as they stood together, it felt as though their entire life wasn't just a series of random meetings, but a journey they had both traveled to end up here, and that was the end of one chapter, but the beginning of a new story.